some of my start really is probably significant to some of the experiences that they're going through now. I went to Bishop Amat High School, and I went there to be the next Pat Hayden. If you're not familiar with who Pat Hayden was, at the time he was the best quarterback in the nation. And I went to the same elementary school, junior high as he did. I 5'10", just like he is, and every time I'd walk through the halls, everybody told me how much I reminded them of Pat. So I was going to be the next great quarterback. Showed up at campus all summer long, worked hard. I was one of the two quarterbacks, and on the first day of pads, big, tall, 6'2" guy walks in that I thought was a tight end. Turned out to be Paul McDonald, who played 9 years in the NFL and won a national championship at USC. So my football career ended, and the freshman coach that I was playing for wasn't sure he liked me very much. I wasn't sure I liked him very much. Probably like a lot of the experiences you guys are having. And I decided to go play basketball. So told him I wasn't going to play football anymore. It was still in August. School hadn't really started yet. And lo and behold, December comes around. November comes around when practice starts. And as the freshman football coach, he was also going to be the freshman basketball coach. So now I kind of burned a bridge, I felt, right? I had an okay, freshman year, played basketball. I was a two-sport guy, right? Three-sport guy. I was going to play baseball too. Turns out, guess who the varsity baseball coach was? Same guy. Decided not to play baseball, and I should have. It was probably my best of the three sports. Then following year, he becomes the school's dean of discipline. So I'm convinced now that the school's dean of discipline doesn't like me. And went through my whole 4 years thinking that. Went to Cal Poly Pomona to play basketball for a guy named Don Hogan. I knew I wasn't going to be a basketball player. I really wanted to coach. I kind of knew that, largely based on some negative experiences I had in high school, and I wanted to be different. So I'm playing basketball in September, and I get a phone call from the dean of discipline, who was also the athletic director by now, who was the guy that didn't like me. And he says, Ray, there's a local junior high school that needs an afternoon PE instructor and coach their 7th and 8th grade sports teams, and I think you'd be great. And so he got me a job with a local private school, teaching PE and coaching basketball and football when I was 18. And I spent 4 years thinking this guy didn't like me. So keep that in the back of your mind. Every time you have that thought that I'm not sure this coach likes me. There may be something deeper than that. Years, a lot of different places, won some games. Those topics might come up. That's not really as important. I've got 4 kids that are all playing, all either have or are playing collegiate sports. Successful high school careers in their own right. So I've done it from both ends. So I've been around the block a couple of times and have seen some good things and some bad things. Most recently, I've been speaking to coaches and athletes and parents around the country. Started coaching for Talking for Positive Coaching Alliance. I was at one of their meetings and I spoke up too much, and they said, you got to speak and sell. So I did that for a period of time. Now I'm kind of doing my own consulting thing with a company that I started called Gold Standard Coaching. And we consult and get a little bit deeper with schools. We'll meet with some of the coaches, do practice visitations, go to games, kind of serve as an in-between double agent, if you will, between the administration and the coaching staff. I try to get the coaching staffs to follow through with the school's mission, and then turn around and find some problems with the coaching staff. And if I can't solve them myself, then I'll go back to administration and see if we can get some changes made. And that's pretty rewarding. Along with that, I work for the Dodgers in their special events department. It's actually called Dodgers 365. It's everything that doesn't have to do with baseball. So parent groups, camps, clinics, special events, stadium tours. It's great to be with a great organization. I think the best thing a coach can do is to, make sure that he's vulnerable and lets everybody know that he's infallible, right? Nobody's perfect. I told a bunch of 10-year-olds I was wrong last night in a Little League practice. So, I certainly think that it's okay to be wrong. Interesting thing about decisions, though. I think that decisions are good or bad at the moment that you make them, right? You can't spend your time resulting, is what I call it, right? Waiting for the end result to decide whether that was a good strategy or a good decision, right? That decision is made hopefully with the right intentions. Maybe I'll explain what that means. With the information that you've been provided, and assuming that you've been diligent in trying to make sure that that information is accurate, right? So if all of those things are considered and you make a decision, now you live with it and try to execute the things that you've decided to the best of your ability. And if it turns out wrong, well, the end result doesn't make it a wrong decision. You might have to go back to the process and see why, that happened, whether you were incorrect in assessing your data, or scouting report or whatever it might be, or whether you made the decision for a wrong reason. I'll give you an example about that. Like, sports can't be personal, right? Some coaches might go into a game and they decide, basketball, for example, I'm going to press and make these guys turn the ball over so that I can have a big point spread and blow these guys out because I don't like the coach or he blew me out last time or whatever. That's not a good reason, right? That's not a decision that's made with the right intention. There's something different behind it. So, I think first off, the decision has got to be made with good intentions. And then using the data determines on whether it's good or bad. I think when you've been around long enough and you have established a little bit of credibility, it doesn't kill you to be wrong, right? Some guys that aren't sure, maybe have to, think that they have to prove something, might approach things from a different perspective. And certainly I'll ask questions a lot to the players, right? If I see them doing something wrong, like you might be suggesting, I might ask them, instead of jumping on them right away and telling them that they were wrong, I might ask them what they saw or what were you thinking, right? Or, what you were trying to accomplish by what you did. And a lot of times their answer will explain their actions. That youth and high school sports have kind of gone down a bad road a little bit, right? I don't think people should be in a hurry to get to the varsity level or play a lot. I think a lot of times there are voices in that person's head that might make them think that that's important, whether it's friends or parents. And generally it's because they're comparing themselves with others. And I don't know who it was, Coach Wax, you probably remember, it might have been Teddy Roosevelt, said comparison is the thief of joy, right? When you spend your time comparing yourself to other players, this guy was on the varsity, that guy's starting or whatever, all of a sudden it takes away your experience and it makes, your athletic endeavors different than what it really should be. You should be just trying to get better every day. Now, as a coach, what I need to do is I need to make sure that young player realizes his future, where I see him in the program, understand that he has value, right? Spend my time encouraging that player so that value is reinforced. And then giving them opportunities in practice to improve on the things that they need to improve in my eyes to get better and earn playing time. And B, sometimes things become evident in practice, who should play and who shouldn't play. And and I think that a lot of those things work themselves out in practice. The underlying problem is what I said first is, the voices in that person's head, right? Who's talking to them around the dinner table on the ride home, at lunch, telling them that, they should be playing, they should be starting. and who's in their ear from outside of the school trying to get them to transfer because, you certainly would play a lot for me if you transferred to my place, when we all know that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And it robs kids of the lessons in learning to fight for a spot. I had to do it with all three of my older kids have gone through that experience. My oldest daughter played basketball at the University of Redlands. Her coach went on sabbatical for a year, and an assistant coach stepped in that wasn't really aware of all the dynamics, and a new assistant coach that had recruited some new players was in his ear. And, my daughter and this other player were even Stevens. I mean, it was close. It was close enough that, it wasn't a huge argument, but the other girl got playing time. My daughter didn't start, and, had to earn that spot back when her other coach returned. And at the end of the day, it was better for her, right? Fighting for it and earning it was much better than it being handed to her because she was, had seniority or something like that.
And you think the most important thing is to communicate to this player, like what and where they see them as a coach say.
Yeah.
How do you handle that conversation? What if the conversation is like, it's not going to be for 2 years. It's not going to be for a while because we have players that are better than me right now. How do you?
Yep. Yeah. When my daughter was being recruited, the head coach said that right up front. You're coming in to play this position, and the girl that is playing this position, she was a wing player, was the conference player of the year as a sophomore. So, those first 2 years, she was going to be sitting. So the third year was that year that I'm talking about where it was supposed to be her turn and didn't turn out to be that way. But all along the way, her coach that was on sabbatical communicated with her, told her to stick in, hang in there. And, when I read your question and I wrote the answer down on my page, I wrote the word communicate in capital letters, right? So you're 100% accurate. I need, as your coach, if, this is you we're talking about, to on a daily basis, hope that you understand your value and where I see you in the future and why I think waiting is best for you, right? I think anytime, that's what we all want to know, right? We all want to know what's in it for me, right? And if I can convey why I think that's better in the long run, then hopefully I can get you to buy in. Yeah, my youngest son is going through that, trying to earn innings as a pitcher at the University of Laverne. He got some innings last year. He's kind of one of the guys that they're counting on. And, the head coach stopped into a bullpen earlier in this week, and that was all he could talk about, right, was how good it felt for the coach to pay some attention and recognize some of the things that he was doing a little bit better. Phrase I always like to use is relentlessly, as a coach, relentlessly reward desired effort, right? Anytime you see anybody, underclassman, sub, or starter, if they're trying to do what you want them to do, you need to recognize that relentlessly, and then they'll buy in.
I'm sorry, relentlessly recognize the
desired effort.
Desired effort.
Right? It might not even be successful, right? But if they're making the effort to do what you desire, there's nothing more we can ask them to do.
Okay, next question. All right, Ethan.
Hi. My question is, how would you deal with a player who is extraordinarily talented and is one of the best players, but just their attitude is awful, or they're always making jokes, or they just won't take it seriously, but they're so valuable to the team?
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, that's a tough one. And you got to be willing to sit them down if you think that that's best, right? Been there, done that as well. And kind of to the previous question, the kid eventually left, and we were better off for it, even though he was one of the best players. He ended up going to 5 high schools in 4 years. Played college, but I think he probably would have had a better experience if he would have just stuck around. He was one of the key guys, but kind of had a bad attitude. And when you can create a culture where the other guys don't have the bad attitude and he's the outlier, right? He's different than everybody else. It starts to become apparent. And hopefully you have leaders on the team that hold him accountable. But you've got to be willing to, all the way back to Coach John Wooden, at UCLA, he said the best discipline's through the seat of the pants, right? Sit him down is what he meant. Sometimes you got to go a little higher and pat him on the back, but, you got to be okay with sitting a talented player down. Otherwise, that creates a dynamic where there's a tiered system and things aren't fair and you're treating people different, and that's not a good thing. There's a difference between having a bad attitude and being a bad teammate, right? Sometimes as a coach, you've got to recognize that kid that might have a bad attitude and try to create a relationship so that you can determine where that is coming from, right? Little story. And he doesn't mind me talking about it. He knows that I use him as a case study in talks. I got a former player I coached from the time he was 9 to the time he was 16 by the name of Nin Burns. Great baseball player, really good football player, didn't commit to baseball until late. His dad was 2-time player of the year in high school as a football guy, and there was all sorts of home issues and problems and pressures. And the kid I recognized he had a bad attitude from the start, but he was a good kid. So built that relationship, earned some trust. He comes to practice one day when he's 14 or 15, and he's just not having it. He's putting on his shoes slow. He's playing an awful game of catch. And, I jumped right away and I said, Nin, not today. It was a playoff game, right? Not today. And, I go in the dugout until you're ready. So I sent him into the dugout. And then about a minute later, and this kind of goes back to admitting you were wrong in the first question. I walked into the dugout and I sat next to him because I realized that his bad attitude didn't have anything to do with me or our team, right? It was something that was happening off the field, at home, or whatever. And he brought that baggage to the field. And I all of a sudden made it about me and made it about our team and made it about the playoff game. Like that was more important than finding out what was wrong with Nin. So I went into the dugout and I apologized. I said, dude, in everything I just told you, I know that it has nothing to do with us. You get yourself together, figure out what you need to do, and come out when you're ready, right? I get it. Still tight with Nin to this day, but, I think recognizing, whether it's a bad attitude or a bad teammate, trying to figure out where that's coming from and going at it from that end might help that situation a little bit too. Yeah, that's really important. Not just in high school, but before then as well. Like when kids are trying to decide what team they're going to go on, rec league, travel league, what travel ball program they're going to go with. You want to get kids that all have the same motivation or mentality, really. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going to have the same ability, right? You do have to focus on making sure that everybody has the goal to be as good as they can be on that particular day, right? And, you might have to be, and when I say you, coach might have to be creative in finding a way to challenge those really good players if they're outnumbered by players that aren't quite so talented. But everybody should have that goal to be their very best on a particular day. And certainly everybody needs to approach practice with the same sense of urgency or commitment to excellence, right? And focus. Just because you're there to have fun, fun doesn't mean, horsing around, making jokes and kicking the guy in front of you in line. It means getting together with a group of guys and trying to get better at something and achieve a common goal, right? That's the kind of fun I want kids to understand they're trying to have. But I need to be able to convey that to kids so that they understand. I look back to some of the days when I coached at smaller schools, And we had some end of the bench senior guys that were just there because they had friends, or, like what Coach Wax was saying. And I think I always liked having seniors at the end of the bench that might not play a lot and give them the responsibility of being leaders on the bench. So again, making them feel valued even though they're not playing very much. And then empowering your leaders or your better players to try to get them the other players a little bit motivated so that they can, keep up in terms of their focus and intensity.
But do you think that having those older players at the end of the bench, like taking roster spots with younger kids that might need the experience, is
Yes. Going back to your very first question, yes, 100 times yes. Because unless that younger kid is going to play, right? It makes no sense to me to have a younger kid on the end of the bench that isn't going to get a lot of minutes, just for the sake of being able to say he's on the varsity, right? The other thing that I do think is valuable, especially at small schools sometimes, is practicing varsity and JVs together, right? So even though you might have better kids on the JVs, like in both times I coached smaller schools, Division 4, Division 5, low enrollment schools, practiced together. And my first 3-4 guys on the JVs were as good as the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th guy on the varsity. But I wanted them to get all those touches and get better. And by going against our guys in practice and the varsity level, gave them an opportunity to do that, right? But I don't want to waste a 12th spot on the bench on a sophomore with potential. I would rather him getting a lot of touches, and maybe I bring him up for tournaments and bring him up in the playoffs or something like that and make sure that he knows he's valuable in that regard. But I want him playing. That's me. A lot of times we use the word could and should interchangeably, right? I think there are a lot of times when you could win and you don't. And then after the game, people think to themselves, oh, we should have won that. Well, that's different, right? There are certainly plenty of games that you could win if things don't go right. I think that, being able to separate, being able to separate results from the process is important. You can't just look at the fact whether you won or lost on determining whether that was a good day or not, right? You need to look inward and try to figure out why that happened, right? What processes or standards did we not meet that caused us to have a bad result? And coached in high school for a long time, went to the college level, coached at Pomona-Pitzer College. And when I got there, the reason the job was open was because Greg Popovich left Pomona-Pitzer College to go to the San Antonio Spurs. Okay. So all of the guys that I was coaching as an assistant were guys that he recruited, and he would come back a few times a year to see them, have dinner with us, and so on. The head coach at the time was his assistant. So he said something that I'll never forget. He said, a basketball game isn't just a game. It's 100 games, right? Maybe 50 on offense and 50 on defense. And if you string together a bunch of those, you're going to go on a little run and you're going to like the result at the end, right? But you can't look at the game as a whole as much as you could look at each individual possession. The final score is essentially irrelevant when it comes to that. So, when I left that college and went back to the high school level, when my son became a freshman in high school, I kind of took that philosophy of, it's not really the result that matters, okay? And got to Bishop Amat and told all of our assistant coaches that we're not going to say the word win one time, ever. Practice, game, halftime, pre-game, post-game speech, that's just a bad word. And so didn't mean we didn't want to win. We started the very first practice of the year putting up new nets, and the first thing we had to do was cut down the old ones, right? Planted that seed a little bit. practiced every Saturday morning at 10:30 in the morning, because Saturday morning is when our CIF final at the pond tipped off. Planted that seed, right? But didn't talk about it and didn't dwell on it, because the final result wasn't what was important. So you need to go back to each individual possession. And when you focus on that every day, that playing possession by possession, pitch by pitch, serve by serve, whatever sport we're talking about, then you can go back to those little points and figure out why it was that you lost a game that you could have won, right? Now you go one step further, and if you lose a game you should have won, then there's probably a whole bunch of breakdowns and a whole lot of spots based on probably every question that has been asked from you guys today, right? Whether it's culture or attitude or commitment or, whatever, right? So should and could are different. Yeah, because going into every practice, you need to understand that you're practicing because you could lose, right? And if I approach it like, I could lose, then, that's just flipping it on the other side, because the other guy's thinking the same thing, right? We could beat these guys, even though you feel you should win. Competition sports like that, performance-based individual sports, are probably, I would almost say, the gold standard of how we should even coach team sports, right? Because it's all on you, and we're looking at your individual personal best every time, right? And when we can train everybody to have those competitive qualities, whether they're doing it individually by themselves on the mat or in a solo performance, compared to, a team sport. I mean, cheerleaders and dancers. My wife was a cheerleading coach. As an activities director in high school, I was in charge of the, competition programs. So tremendous respect for that end of the spectrum. And certainly, I think they're athletes. I'm glad it's recognized as a sport now. But to strive to have the competitive qualities that gymnasts and dancers and cheerleaders, competition cheerleaders have, is something that team sports athletes should strive to get. And no matter who it is, you have to develop that toughness, resilience, and grit to really be successful in anything that you do, right? And those things are different. Like, to me, toughness is being able to focus on the one thing that you need to focus on right now, okay? So that's all over gymnastics and dance and cheer, right? I would always get on my basketball players and use dancers and cheerleaders as an example of how come they can all be in unison with each other, they can all be synchronized, and we can't set a screen and use a screen at appropriate time, right? You got to work together, right? So there's some team aspects of that as well. But anytime we can focus on, what's important now, that one little thing, and then being able to learn from some of the mistakes that we might have made in order to get better, that's a good thing. And, then when you go to individual sports like track and field and swimming, it's all on you, and personal best is all we're striving for, right? So in terms of comparing your own personal best, that's more important than comparing your score to somebody else. Goes back to that comparison. It's the thief of joy. I want you guys to do something for me. Everybody stand up. You didn't know this was going to be an activity class. Now, with both feet on the ground, I want you to reach as high as you can. Both hands. Now I want you to reach 6 inches higher. See, some of you were able to do that, and you shouldn't have been, because what was my first instruction? Reach as high as you can, right? That's what we're striving for. You can put your hands down. We're striving to do your very, very best every single time, and not even be able to try better when somebody's yelling at you to go faster, or, play better. You shouldn't be able to play better or be more focused in crunch time than you were at the opening tip or first pitch or the beginning of a routine. One serve at a time, right? Focus on your goal, and when one point is over, the coolest thing about my daughters playing volleyball that I learned was after every play, y'all get together and you shake it off, right? And you get that play out of your system and you go back to your spots and you're ready for the next serve. I think being able to put that last point behind you and focus on the next point is really what's important, because, again, the score is insignificant, right? Whether you're up by a bunch or down by a bunch, it doesn't matter. Doesn't change how you want to execute on this particular play, right? I'm still going to do my best. I'm still going to, do everything that I'm supposed to do until it becomes strategy time, where you might want to do things a little bit different at the end. But each point matters.
That's probably a great place to wrap up.
Yeah, that Bishop Amat year was kind of fun, kind of magical. Like I said, I went to Bishop Amat, coached there as an assistant, went to the college level, eventually came back as a head coach. And did all sorts of things to try to build our culture and get players connected. They were very, very talented and played extremely hard, and they didn't have a very good team culture. And so that was really my only contribution, was bringing them together. Fast forward, win a CIF championship. But our best player, I realized I moved him from the post out to the wing. Now he was a big, tall perimeter guy, made us a little bit different. And we were walking around after a practice in the summer, right after I just got the job, and we stopped in our Hall of Fame. And Bishop Amat's a really big football school, right? There's all sorts of retired jerseys, and there's no retired basketball jerseys. And so I asked Johnny what you needed to do to get your number retired. And he said, I don't know, set records, be the leading scorer. And I said, no, our policy here at the school is all those people up there are CIF players of the year. And in order to be the player of the year, usually you're the most valuable player on the championship team. And, he sat back and he kind of soaked that in for a minute, and he realized that, you can't get recognition as the CIF player of the year and get your number retired unless we're champions, right? Unless we play together and achieve that. And, and he turned around and, he was our area's player of the year in the San Gabriel Valley newspaper player of the year. He's the CIF player of the year. We won the CIF championship. You don't tell stories unless they have a good ending. And about good endings, see, getting kids to buy into a program is about setting up standards and having a clear mission, right? And our mission was what we wanted them to care about each other, think about what they did and how it affected the game and each other, try their very best and enjoy what they're doing. That was ultimately what we came down to. Those were our goals. And again, great career. Fast forward 15 years. And I've got to play. See, I thought that was my vision, right? Winning championships, cutting down nets, getting inducted into, the Bishop Amat Hall of Fame, giving a speech. I thought that was my vision. 15 years later, I get a phone call a text message from one of the players on that team who struggled early in the year. I showed some belief in him. Fourth quarter of the championship game, I think he had 9 points. Was the paper's player of the year the following year. So Paul Porter, Steve, he sends me a text, says, can we go out for coffee? And I said, yeah. So 15 years later, he says, so I'm starting this business. I got this business. I'm into, climate change, and I want a green business. He started a business called Keep It Green Tech. And he didn't know anything about technology, but he just had this vision. He was a go-getter, and he wanted to start a company. So we had a talk for about 2 hours on teamwork, all of the things that we discussed today, right? They all transfer to life, right? We were sitting there having a conversation on how he can run his business by talking about what we did to win a championship 15 years earlier, right? This was 2017. 2023, he's hopscotching around the world, having the best time. He was at the Monaco Grand Prix. He, he's had an amazing summer. I'm jealous. But it was using those same techniques. He's having lunch with Schwarzenegger and getting millions of dollars from Uber because of his electric car concept. It's amazing how it transfers. I said my oldest daughter played college basketball. When she graduated, she went and got her doctorate, and I said, how did you do that? So tough, right? Basement, labs, cadavers. And she said, Daddy, I never could have done it if it wasn't for shooting slumps and losing streaks. Right? The bad stuff you're going through is going to help you later, I swear.
Thank you so